Welcome to the Nightmare Zoo, where the hunt is never over. The shadows are always watching. If you want to survive the next encounter, you need to be prepared. Subscribe to the Nightmare Zoo. Hit that like button before something in the dark hits you first. Deep in the woods, terrifying cryptid encounters 1. The Howling Madness. Dogman terrorizes campground in Ohio. The laughter around the campfire at Blackthorn Campground died instantly, severed by a sound that didn't belong in the Ohio woods. It wasn't a howl. It was a symphony of nightmares, a deep, guttural roar layered with the high-pitched shriek of a dying animal. Then came the screams from Site 7. Park Ranger Marcus Vance arrived 10 minutes later to a slaughterhouse. The 2 families were gone. What was left was a gallery of gore. A father was found draped over his own picnic table, his spine bent backwards at an impossible angle, snapped over the edge like a piece of firewood. His ribs were splayed outward, a grisly flower of bone and tissue. The children's tent was in tatters, the nylon slick with blood, with small, bite-sized pieces of bone scattered within. The final victim, a teenager who had tried to flee, was found jammed headfirst into the steel drum fire ring, his legs broken and twisted to fit him inside like a human candle. Claw marks 3 deep gouges were scored into every surface, and the only thing louder than the buzzing flies was the lingering musky stench of wet dog and copper. The attack wasn't for food. It was for sport. 2. The Indiana Goliath. Violent Sasquatch. Attack on a farm. The Wilkerson's Indiana dairy farm was known for its quiet solitude. That silence was broken by the panicked bellowing of cows and the sound of splintering wood. Old Tom Wilkerson went out with his shotgun, expecting coyotes. He found the giant. It was 9 feet tall and built of pure rage-filled muscle, its dark matted hair caked with mud and blood. It had a cow in each hand, swinging them like clubs against the barn, reducing the animals to pulverized meat and shattered bone. It saw Tom. With a bellow that shook the ground, it charged. Tom got 1 shot off before the creature was on him. It didn't swat him aside. It grabbed him. 1 massive hand wrapped around his torso, the other around his thigh. With a wet, tearing crack that echoed across the fields, it pulled. Tom Wilkerson was ripped in 2 at the hips. The creature, unsatisfied, then turned its fury on the farmhouse where Tom's family hid. It punched through the roof, tearing away shingles and beams, reaching down into the attic. When the sheriff arrived, he found the house half demolished and deep, bipedal tracks leading back into the corn, the stalks painted red with a violence that was anything but animal. 3. The Starving Shadow. Wendigo attacks a hunter in a tree stand. The Canadian air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Ben Carter was 20 feet up in his maple tree stand, hoping for a buck. He got something else. A sudden, unnatural silence fell over the snowy forest. Then came the smell of the sweet, putrid stench of rot and old blood. A figure emerged from the pines. It was emaciated, 7 feet tall, with skin like stretched, gray parchment pulled tight over a skeletal frame. Its head was a nightmare. A skull-like face with sunken black pits for eyes and a mouth stretched wide in a permanent, hungry scream filled with needle-sharp yellow teeth. It moved with a skittering, jerky speed, zeroing in on Ben's stand. It started to climb, not with hands and feet, but with long, bony claws that dug into the frozen wood, moving upside down and sideways like a grotesque insect. Ben fired his rifle. The bullet tore through its shoulder, spraying black, frozen ichor. It didn't even flinch. Its head twisted 180 degrees to look at him, and it let out a sound like 100 starving rats. It lunged the final few feet. Ben tried to block with his rifle. The Wendigo's jaws closed on the barrel, snapping the solid steel in 2. 1 long arm shot out, and a clawed hand closed around Ben's ankle. There was a sickening pop crunch as it crushed the bone to powder. It yanked him from the stand. As he fell, the last thing Ben saw was that gaping, starving mouth descending toward his face. 4. The Everglade Devil. Reptilian creature attacks fisherman. The airboat's engine caught, leaving only the buzz of insects in the humid Florida Everglades. The 3 tourists laughed, casting their lines into the murky water. Something far larger than a gator breached the surface. It was a nightmare of scales and raw power. A bipedal reptile with a muscular tail and a jaw that unhinged like a snake's, revealing row upon row of needle-like teeth. Its arms ended in 3-fingered claws, each tipped with a talon like a straight razor. It launched itself into the boat with terrifying speed. It didn't tip the boat. It wanted in. It grabbed the first man, Steve, by the head and shoulder. With a vicious twist, it ripped his head from his body with a sound like tearing Velcro and cracking vertebrae. Blood fountained into the air. The second tourist, Maria, froze in shock. The creature's tail, thick as a telephone pole, whipped around and struck her in the legs. The force didn't knock her down. It shattered both her femurs, dropping her to the deck with a scream. The creature then turned to the last man, Jake, who was fumbling with a fillet knife. It swiped a claw, not to kill, but to maim. The talons sliced through his forearm, severing tendons and scraping down the bone with a nauseating screech. It then grabbed his now useless hand, and with a wet crunch, bit it off at the wrist. As it retreated back into the tea-colored water with its trophies, it left the survivors amidst a scene of absolute carnage, the Everglades swallowing its silence once more. And thank you for watching the Nightmare Zoo. We have a symphony of nightmares on the way, so stay tuned.